Our guest today is a lady called Chris Cole, who has a huge amount of knowledge on everything dyslexia and neurodiversity. She has her own business called Unique Minds, where she does one-on-one coaching, helping people with personal development, and also consults for businesses on how to create neurodiverse friendly workplaces. She's the author of a children's book called All a Part of Me, and she works for the Learning Differences Trust down in Invercargill, which is actually where I first met Chris, through the Growing Stars program that she helps run for them, and the Dyslexia Support Southland program too. Now, Growing Stars, I just want to do a bit of a promo here for that, because that's where my daughter came in touch with Chris, and it's a brilliant program. So it's a 2-day program where the children learn about their dyslexia and how their mind works, start to think of it as just being a different way of thinking. And then they start to learn about how, when their brains go offline, where to recognize anxiety in their body and how to deal with it. So they learn about belly breathing. They come away with a whole load of tools, like these little flashcards on what to do when they start to feel anxious, when to implement their belly breathing. And then they do posters and things on how to recognize where the anxiety is hitting them in their body, so that they know when to implement those practices. So it's a great program for parents as well. There's a bit of a course there on what dyslexia is, if they're new to dyslexia, and how to help their child at home as well. So brilliant program. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. Maybe start off with sharing a bit about your personal journey with dyslexia, and what motivated you in reaching out and helping other people with your business and with charity as well.
Thank you, Danielle, and really nice to be here. And thanks for the promo for Growing Stars. We're really excited about that program. So yeah, and it's nice to know that it did what it was supposed to do. So yeah, journey. It started way back because I'm mum of 4 boys, and we went traveling overseas, and to do that, I homeschooled. So I dived right into the homeschooling. I loved it. I'm actually an accountant by trade, so it was a bit of a change. But I found out my kids weren't learning. And when we came back, we were away for about 5 years. And when we came back to New Zealand, that's when we found out about dyslexia. And, and I thought, it just shifted my whole perspective on why these kids weren't learning. And I'd started to notice that they were getting really anxious around certain things. So it was really that awareness, and I really liked being able to help people. But it was when they went back into school, they struggled, my 2 dyslexics, and it really was an emotional hit for them, and they felt pretty low. And I just didn't want to see my kids like that. So I was really motivated that, no one else should feel like they are wrong for how they think or process information. So that's my motivation for why I do what I do.
That's a great story. So what timeline was this? Was it in the 90s, or where were
It was, we came back in 2009. So dyslexia had only been recognised in the schooling system for 2 years. So the awareness in schools was very low. When the Ministry of Education recognised it, all the support they did for schools was give them a booklet. So there was, even back then, the word neurodiversity wasn't used. No one knew about that. The dyslexia was sort of like a dirty word. You didn't, like, we would start off with learning differences, because that was one that was more acceptable for parents and for schools, because they were all just starting to learn what dyslexia meant and what understanding. Now, dyslexia it doesn't have the same connotations. And, we've got words like neurodivergence, neurodiversity being used in education as well.
Yeah. So when the boys went back to school, what sort of challenges did you face, and how did you overcome those with the school?
One of them, I actually ended up asking the school if I could go into the classroom and be a teacher aide, but I wasn't paid as a teacher aide. And I just did it it wasn't very long, like 5 or 6 weeks. It wasn't longer than a term. And what I found I was doing was actually just explaining the instructions. There was a whole group started forming around me, because the teacher would explain what they had to do, and I'd break it down for them. And they go, oh yeah, okay, I know what to do. understanding instructions is a really big barrier. And, work that I've done with teens at high school, understanding instructions is something that is really impacting on them being able to engage in their learning.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, my eldest daughter's autistic. So for her, with the instructions that school gives, it has to be very black and white. There cannot be any grey areas at all. So I think that's still probably a fairly big problem we're still facing
Oh,
in
without a
30
doubt.
years later.
Yeah, I agree. And look, some of the teams I've seen and worked with, their coping strategies for managing probably aren't the most productive. And so they may flare up and, their emotional regulation isn't strong. So they then get labeled with bad behavior when all it is they're just trying to say, I don't understand, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. So what would you say from your experience there in the school was some common misconceptions about dyslexia that you had to confront, both personally with the school and maybe perhaps with you yourself?
Because the understanding about dyslexia is in pockets, right? There isn't a consistency. And quite often we know about the challenges that come with dyslexic thinking, but people just don't understand easily or much about the strengths that come with it.
Mm.
Because, if we understand the holistic part of a dyslexic learner, we can use their strengths to help hook them into their learning. So I think just not being aware, even now I still hear, oh, B's and D's back to front, or they can't read and write. Well, I didn't realize I was dyslexic until 7 years ago because I could read and write. So I thought, well, I can't be dyslexic. And I was in the industry believing this, and so a lot of those misconceptions that, that can't spell, I'm a good speller. But so it's just all those understanding that it's bigger than just not reading and writing.
Mm.
It's short-term memory, it's ordering and sequencing. And it impacts across, it's not just academic impact, it impacts on being able to play sport, social situations.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much more to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
And what advice would you give to parents who've just learned that their children or child is dyslexic, and maybe some of the things that maybe a story that might inspire other parents there as well?
Yeah. What I tend to do when I learn about something new is I want to find out more about it.
Mm.
But I do think it's valid advice here because the more you know about dyslexia, the challenges and the strengths that come with it, you can start to identify it in your children so that you can then help to pick apart what is the dyslexia that that's impacting on that part of their learning.
Mm.
So you can start to break down the overwhelm. So
Yeah.
learn more about it. But the other thing too that I think is really important is find your tribe. And this is where the work that you do is so important because you're not alone as a parent.
Mm.
Finding others that are going through the same thing helps reduce your own parental anxiety. Parental anxiety is a big deal and it needs to be dealt with compassionately as well as supporting the child.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the parental support is incredibly important. And I think it's something from my journey that I found there isn't a lot aimed towards the parents and how they can help. It's very much aimed at the child and getting the child tutoring or teaching the child how to do those academic things. But there's so much more to it in terms of supporting their, you know, a more probably holistic approach around confidence building and growth mindset and those kind of things, which are the things that make the real difference from my perspective in any case.
Yep. And look, I'd agree. And with all the work that I've done in the sector, for like 13 years now, it is, yeah, definitely the holistic support is, has to be in place to really make the difference in the academic. You can't do it in isolation. But you know what I'd say, just hearing you talk about it like that, that's a big picture thinking of how to support dyslexics, which when you're dyslexic, you see quite naturally.
Yeah,
And so some people who don't think in that big picture quite as easily can struggle to see, that you need to do it that way.
yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that I read somewhere was that, a child can, through tutoring, become the best reader and writer in the room, but unless you've got that background support in helping them to overcome what they've already been through in terms of, when they were younger, not knowing how to read and feeling like they couldn't do things, then they won't succeed in life because they're still hanging on to those sort of emotional hurts where they felt like they weren't good enough. So I think it's really, really important.
I do too. And look, when I work with adult dyslexics, they really struggle to see the strengths they have with their dyslexic thinking.
Yeah.
So if parents, when the kids are younger, can sort of really help them identify their dyslexic thinking strengths, that benefits them when they're adults.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So what are some of the biggest challenges you faced growing up with dyslexia? Of course, you wouldn't have known about it until you said 7 years ago. So how did you overcome some of those problems that perhaps you faced when you were younger?
Yes, well, probably my coping strategies just turned out to be quite efficient because I like being organized and I have perfectionism. So I would work really, really hard. But I always used to wonder, like I was at school and, my friends would pick up stuff so easily. And when I was at university doing my BCom, they would get it in like 2 goes and it would take me hours and hours to just sort of remember part of it. So I actually went through thinking I wasn't very smart. So I still had that. So that was probably the overwhelming belief as I went through, and I minimize what I have achieved, which is, all part of the impact to self-esteem and confidence that happens when you're not recognized for the strengths you bring, yourself.
Yeah. It's quite a tricky journey. I think even though I was diagnosed as a child, there wasn't as much known about dyslexia as there is today, and I still those perhaps those time blindness and the kind of scheduling and that kind of thing were the things that I struggled with a lot. And I don't think I really realised they were part of my dyslexia until Bella's diagnosis came along. And it's interesting how we learn how to kind of get around them, but also still feel like, why can't we do that? Or how come I keep forgetting those things? I think it's
Yeah, 100%. And thinking about the dyslexia and how it's impacted me, something I really had to learn was not to be blunt. And like that's because that can be a thing of being dyslexic.
yeah,
But and in emails, it's like I think in bullet points, so I want to write in bullet points, but that can annoy some people because it's not sort of fluffy and nice. So I had to really be clear, conscious of getting the info in my head down in like an email or report, and then going back and doing all the nice stuff and it's not that I don't care, it's just that I've got to get it out of my head or I'll lose it. So yeah,
100%. I've actually found recently using ChatGPT to help round off, I guess is what I call it, some of my emails has been really helpful.
Oh yeah, Chatty, she's my best friend. And just look, I didn't realize how much I struggled with sequencing and ordering information. I had to create an outline for a podcast, sort of type thing. And like I can picture it in my head, I can see who's going to be talking, where we're going to be doing it, and all that. But to put it down on paper in logical steps, I thought, oh yeah. So I asked ChatGPT and came up with 8 steps. And just like that. And I looked at it, it was like magic because I thought I would have got there, but it would have taken a lot of brain power.
Yeah.
And, it's just that I didn't realize how much I struggled with it until, Chetty came along. So,
Yeah. We're so fortunate to have such great, tech coming through that can, really supports neurodiverse people and I guess everyone really, but helps with those things incredibly. How has having dyslexic children influenced your work that you do with the charity?
It made me start it. Dyslexics can be very motivated at wanting to make the world a better place. So that may start with their kids, but it goes into a bigger place as I think that you just want to make the world a better place. And so that was the kickstart for the motivation. But it was, really making a difference, because I struggled to know what to do and what were the best steps, what I needed to know. And I just didn't want any other parent to have to go through that and spend unnecessary money and time, resources trying to work it out. So we're very much about providing the expert, non-biased, free advice to help parents work out what they can do to support their children.
And what with the charity, which are some of the programs or things that you've done with them that have made the most impact, do you think?
The trust expanded. So we started as a parent support group, and then we set up the Growing Stars, help with the emotional impact for children 6 to 12. And then we created the trust to get the funding. And then we provide professional development for educators, because they were asking, I need to know more about it. And then we set up an adult support group because they were asking for support. So we work with, and we've created some online content, just to help always spread the awareness and the message, so that the more that people know, the more consistency we can get and the more it's going to be okay for our kids.
Some great work being done, isn't there, to really make workplaces aware. And I think from when we were talking before, you've actually started something new just recently in that area.
Yeah. So Unlock Innovation Limited, with a good friend of mine, Dorinda Britton, in Christchurch, and her brother was John Britton, who invented the motorbike and was dyslexic. So she's passionate about making a change and a difference for people who think differently as well. So it's all about, creating that awareness. And then once they have the awareness, they can change the mindset. And because dyslexia can really be hidden, quite easily. It's such a large number of the different types of neurodiversity, but it's really can be masked, quite well. So we have to really help people understand, what it means before we can get traction.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of support systems do you think are essential for individuals with dyslexia in education, workplaces and everyday life?
For parents, because we get a lot of parents saying, what can I do? I can't do maths, or I don't know how to teach reading. So how can I help my child academically? But it's like you were alluding to before, if we work in that area of the self-esteem and the anxiety, we can help their brain and themselves be in a better place, so that when they go to the learning, they've got a better chance for their brain taking it in and understanding it. So it's really important with the self-esteem. When we work with parents, we talk about growth mindset and using targeted and specific feedback to improve their self-esteem. So we've got a wee tip sheet that we have around targeted and specific feedback that we can give to parents, so we can make that available. But it's, I didn't know the benefit of it until I did it with one of my kids. And so one of my boys was struggling with maths, and I was trying to tutor him, and we were butting heads, and it just wasn't working. Our relationship was falling apart, really. And so I said, look, I was able to send him to a maths tutor, which was, something that I was fortunate to do. And I started working on this targeted and specific feedback. And I had to practice it, because my parental anxiety sort of kept taking me to the stuff that he was struggling with. So I really had to be conscious about it. And I would put down at the start of the day, I think, I'm going to say, I like how you do this, or I noticed that. And then I'd finish it off, but it'd be really specific. So it's targeted to the effort he was putting in. And it didn't have to be about learning. It could be anything. He was really good at sensing how other people felt. So that's what I did. And I did it for two weeks, just 2 weeks. And I couldn't believe the change.
Yeah.
In that time, he was standing up straighter. Our relationship improved, and he felt better, and he calmed down with his maths.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, doesn't it? So what would you say, what role does a growth mindset play in supporting the child's development, and how can parents, maybe just one thing that we can take away from today's talk that they can implement at home?
Well, because growth mindset just means knowing that your brain can change, is using the word yet. So, they might be saying, oh, I can't do this. And you can say, yet. And you can actually refer them back to, remember when you were learning to do this? Say, for example, riding a bike. Remember when you couldn't do it at the start, but now you can? You couldn't do it then, but now you can. So you go to the examples where they have made that progress to show that their brain learned to do that, created the pathways, and they can get there. Dyslexics, the thinking is different. It can take longer and more effort, but it doesn't mean they can't do it. They can do it. They're just not doing it yet. So that would be using the word yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And how do you think that parents could help to boost their dyslexic child's self-esteem? So you talked about the sheet that you've got, which will be attached to this video for everyone that's watching. How do we think, is there anything else that we can do to help with self-esteem issues?
Yeah, I think so the growth mindset, the targeted specific praise, but also identifying their strengths, and also giving them the space, because what I've found with one of my boys, he was really struggling with his reading, and when I was homeschooling, we actually did a type of phonics program, but I didn't know about it, how valuable it was, compared to now. And he never got it. Like one week he would know 10 sounds, the next week he'd know 20. And I did that for about 7 months, and it just never really seemed to stick. And I tried something else. And over time, we came back to New Zealand, and then he went into school. So he actually didn't read until he was 9. But when it came out and it was all there. And out of the family of dyslexics and non-dyslexics, he's the best at spelling. He's the best at sounding out. And he can read. When you're helping your children and it feels like it's going nowhere, it's going in, but they need things like their brain to develop. They need maybe a bit of confidence that they get playing sport or playing an instrument. And those things all come together and help them progress.
Yeah, that's what I say on my channel a lot, is to lean into the things that they're good at, and it doesn't matter whether that's painting rocks even, just leaning into those things, and then it gives you the opportunity to support that growth mindset and say, well, when you started, this is what you were producing, and now we're doing this, and look how far you've come. And it also gives them that confidence that if they can achieve and progress in that area, then they can start to see how they can do it in areas that perhaps they're not so good at, which is, I think, one of the most important things. But going back to what you were saying about not thinking that what you were doing wasn't making any difference, is, for me, I think it's learning to spin on your head and not to keep banging your head against the wall. So if it's affecting your relationship with your child, like you say, is, change course and keep changing, because until you actually give up entirely, you everything that you do is going to help you get towards there. And you only really fail when you give up. You've just got to keep changing course.
And that is the life of a parent of a dyslexic child.
And of course, everything doesn't work for every brain. So where another parent might be having great success with one program, you'll take it on and it just doesn't hit home for your child. So it's quite different for everybody. But from your wealth of knowledge, which I know that you have, as I've picked your brains so many times, could you, just to kind of round up, maybe give some suggestions of any community resources or support groups that parents might find helpful?
And this is the thing, the increase in awareness has meant there's been increased resources that we can go to. So there's our website, dyslexiasupportsouth.org.nz, which has got a parent, component to it. And a lot of the info I talk about is in there. Made by Dyslexia in the UK is a really good one. It's from a strengths-based point of view. Like, even if you're wanting to find a group to connect with in your area, Parent to Parent is a group that meets monthly. So you just find others that can have some understanding. And a new charity that we're going to be working with to bring in some information about dyslexia and dyscalculia, but they have information about autism and ADHD, is Listening to Families. So that's a website that we can put the link in, because they have, it's questions from families that are put to experts and answered. So it's all connecting together, isn't it? That, working together to support and increase awareness. Yeah.
Listening to families, is that specifically questions to experts regarding neurodiversity, or is it about all sorts of issues?
All sorts.
Yeah. So quite an interesting place to go and visit and see what others are going through, because of course we all have the same questions. Everyone, if somebody's asking it, it means that there's more than one person asking it and wanting to know the answer.
I agree. And, and being aware too that people are at different stages of the journey. A parent who's just found out compared to a parent who's known for a year. There's different stages of knowledge, but there's different stages in the emotional journey that goes with it as well. Because when you find out your kids are struggling, you sort of feel like, well, you give up. There's a lot of conditioning about the kids being top of the class and things like that. Now, my focus changed to, I just want them to be happy, and be okay in themselves, and to manage school enough so that they come out okay. There's a lot of emotion that goes around that. So, and if you're a dyslexic who's just found out yourself, compared to someone who's known for longer, you sit in a different space as well. So being aware that everyone has their own journey as well, and supporting each other.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of your knowledge and sharing that with everyone. I hope everyone's found that helpful today, and if you've got any questions, just pop them in the comments below, and Chris and I will do our best to come back to you.